Noah's Ark. What a fascinating yet controversial story that is. It has to be one of the top debated stories in the entire Bible. Now, all of us know the story, but how many of us really know the details behind the why of it? Today, as we journey through Genesis chapter 6, verses 9 through 22, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to uncover the why behind this event and explore the details of God's message to Noah. So let's look at this. Let's look at Noah. Let's look at his experience with an open heart and with a curious mind so that we can discover some of those ancient truths that are so relevant to us today. Genesis 6 was in a time that none of us would surely want to live. That pre-flood civilization wrestled with violence and corruption like we in this 21st century can not even imagine. The world had gone astray and to such an extent that it caused God to send a divine intervention. His persistent evil of the day caused God to say, I'm sorry that I even created man. And it prompted him to decide upon a global flood judgment. In the midst of all of this, we see God's judgment of human wickedness actually balanced out by his mercy in preserving the remnants of humanity through one man, through Noah. While the wrath brings the devastating flood, his grace gives us salvation. Salvation to all of us that's available because Noah lived. Noah obeyed, so we are here today. Noah and his family were preserved through the ark, and that gives us hope. Noah found grace. Grace is unmerited favor. Noah did not do one thing to deserve this. If he had, it wouldn't have been grace. It would have been something he earned. It was not grace, though, that allowed him to build the ark. It was his faithfulness. God instructed him to build the ark, to save himself, to save his family, and to save the animals of every kind from impending destruction by the floodwaters. So, in the midst of this, we come to a shift for genealogy in chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, and it may seem like, why interrupt all of this wickedness? Why interrupt the story about Noah to talk about a genealogy? Especially when genealogies aren't that interesting for most of us anyway. But verses 9 and 10 tell us, this is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Well, this genealogy break really is significant to us. Genesis 5 had traced the genealogy of Noah through the family of Seth, and it ended there in Genesis 6:9a. But Noah's son introduces the transition to a new world that's going to begin in Genesis 6:9b, and that will continue through the end of Genesis 10. You realize that every living being here is related to Noah? He and his 3 sons form the family tree branches of human race following the flood. Right after this genealogy, God gives us a picture, though, of imminent doom again. He reminds us that only one righteous man was not enough to save the entire world. Verses 11 and 12, just a reminder to us, another picture of how God saw the world. The earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on earth. Now, this word corrupt has the idea of being ruined, spoiled, destroyed. Sinful people were bringing ruin to the world that God himself had created, the world that belonged to our living God. Judgment came upon all flesh, and the flood was a punishment that met their crime. Genesis 6, verse 13, and God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the world is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Well, this could mean the grace period of 120 years spoken of in Genesis 6:3, when God said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for his days shall be 120 years. It could mean that 120 years is coming to a close. Or it could just mean that God looked at all this wickedness, looked at all the corruption, and said, enough is enough. I've had it. The divine decree to end all life reveals the magnitude of the coming flood as God declares, I will ruin, destroy, and wipe out both of them, and also the earth. Not only do we see that mankind was destroyed, but the earth also would never be the same. It too would be ruined. God's message to Noah was graphic and also severe. Yet, in the midst of this, God's grace was still evident. The creator of the universe, who owes no man anything, extended unmerited favor to one man. And he gave him a command. Said, get on, build the ark, build yourself an ark. The detailed specifications highlight the precision of this project. But not only that, it also signifies God's involvement in humanity's salvation. Genesis 6, verses 14 through 16. I mean, this is really detailed, right down to the letter, to the size. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in the side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. Now, this ark was not a boat with a bow and a stern. No, it was designed more like a barge for the conveyance of materials, people, animals. And it was built merely for the purpose of floating on the water and protecting the occupants of those inside. Think, 300, how big is that? 300 cubits by this and that? Well, the ark is as large as a modern ocean tanker. It's shaped like a huge box and probably had a flat bottom. The ark in Hebrew refers to a chest or a box. And when you think about this term, ark, it's the very same term that's used of a box or even a basket of bulrushes. And he was put in the Nile River, and within that, he was able to float down the river, and he was to be rescued. And this same term gives us such a clear picture and more understanding of the fact that the ark represents Jesus Christ as our refuge from judgment and our provider of salvation. Then it says, make it of gopher wood. Now, what in the world is gopher wood? Actually, there's been a lot of controversy over that because we don't have any gopher trees today. You can look the world over and never find one tree made out of gophers. Well, It could be either the type of wood, and if it were, that would be a cypress tree, probably, or it could be the type or the way the wood was processed. And if that's the case, the process then would be a laminating process. And this technique of manufacturing material in multiple layers so that the composite material achieves improved strength and stability and a very sound installation. Now, this modern-like construction, it shouldn't surprise us at all, because remember back in Genesis 4 when we were talking about Cain and his relatives, and how that one of them had already invented the fact of smelting iron. So the people of Noah's days were no dummies. They were advanced. They were not the prehistoric generation as we see, because in the Bible there's no such term as prehistoric, because everything is written down. Now these people in that day were very advanced. God says, make some room to separate the animals from the people for the trip, and also so that you can have storage space for your food and supplies, and you can have a little privacy. Noah used pitch to seal the ark against leaks, and the sealing agent was probably a substance like tar, similar to our asphalt today. The size of the ark was 300 by 50 by 30 cubits. Here we come to a little bit of a controversy, because the length of a cubit was defined by culture, and it varied from culture to culture. Most modern-day translators of the Bible say a cubit is 18 inches long. And if we allow this 18-inch cubit to help us determine the size of the ark, we're going to say its dimensions were 450 long by 75 feet wide by 45 feet high. But we got a little problem here. You see, we know from archaeology that this 18-inch cubit did not come to use until after the time of Hezekiah. So what did Noah use? Noah did not use this measurement. You see, Moses was the author of Genesis. And Moses was raised in Egypt, and he was familiar with the old Egyptian Babylonian cubit of 20.6 inches. And this measurement is confirmed in several places. One, King Tut's tomb, which they found has a measuring stick that they found 20.6 inches. Also, the palaces where Moses was raised, and the palace where he and Aaron went to confront Pharaoh. The measurement between those two palaces measures out exactly if you use 20.6 inches. So, the Bible gives us the size of the ark in cubits, 300 by 50 by 30. Translating the size of cubits according to Moses' time in Egypt, the ark size was 515 feet long by 85 and a half feet wide by 51 and a half feet high. You think, what difference does a boat size make? Stick around. We'll talk about it later in a few more weeks, and it will become significant. God also told them to put a window in. Now that might seem like a no-brainer, because they needed some way for all that air to circulate, especially with all the animal poop going around. And also they needed an opening for door light. But yet they needed protection from the torrents of the rain. And all of this demanded a good deal of engineering and crafting. The Hebrew word for window is used only here in the Old Testament, so it too is debated. Was it that opening that Noah sent the birds through later on after the flood? Or was it because it said a cubit above the decks? Maybe it was something that went all the way around the ark. That's one of those questions that I'm not sure I can answer today. But we do know the ark had a door that was positioned on the side that opened up on all 3 floors. And this was to cordon off all the animals. You know, you look at all these details and you think, wow, God told Noah everything. So all he had to do was follow a plan. Yet we have to remember that it was a supernatural event. How the animals came, and even how they acted after they got there, was only because God had sent them and God directed them. Not only did he direct the animals, God did it all. God himself claims responsibility for the flood and the judgment to come. Genesis 6:17, and behold, I myself am bringing flood waters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. God reveals to Noah the method of judgment to come. But more than that, he says, I'm responsible. God says, I am the one that's going to bring judgment on earth by a worldwide flood. The word translated for Noah's flood is our word for cataclysmatic, meaning devastating, catastrophic. It's going to come in and it's going to destroy everything. Scripture places significant emphasis on the personal role God had in the upcoming storm. This flood was God's work. The decision to destroy all of earth was made by God and God alone. Noah didn't come up with the plan. Those people who were sinning certainly didn't. No, this was God's idea. It was a supernatural judgment from God. Yet, in the midst of oncoming judgment, this God of love and mercy, he paused to assure the heart of Noah and also to enter in a covenant with him. Genesis 6:18. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. In strong contrast to God's revealed punishment, God in his mercy looks at Noah and establishes a covenant. God obligated himself to maintain his commitment to Noah, that Noah would be the recipient of his promises, of his blessings, and not only that, he would not die in the flood. This is the very first time that the word covenant is used in the Old Testament, in the Bible. And so Noah had no idea what covenant meant. He'd never even heard of the word. And to make things even harder for him, no details were given to him until after the flood occurred. You see, Noah didn't realize what God was really promising and what this meant to God to make a promise like that so that he would enter into covenant. In Genesis, we'll later see how God entered into covenant with Abraham. And this is such a great picture of the word because you see, covenant originated from the Hebrew word meaning to divide. So when God and Abraham enters into covenant, God has a deep sleep come upon Abraham to prove there's nothing here that Abraham's doing, just as there was nothing that Noah was doing. And then God divided animals. He split them in two, and his presence walked between those animals. And this picture of God walking through those split animals signifies to us what the real meaning of covenant meant. It signifies what will happen and what will be the consequences of one breaking a covenant. The underlying meaning is the covenant breaker shall be split in two, like these two animals were split in two. God says, if I ever break my covenant, you can divide me, you can tear me apart. God's, because he could swear by no other, swore by himself. And so amidst impending judgment, the covenant between Noah and God signifies to you and me that we have hope and that we can find redemption. After this brief pause, God goes right back to talking about the ark. And he gives us a picture of the passengers and the cargo with instructions for gathering animals and provision to emphasize that the ark is really a means of preserving life. In verses 20 and 21, and every living thing of earth shall you bring, 2 of every sort to the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds after their kind, of the animals after their kind, and of every creeping thing on the earth after its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. What a responsibility. And you shall take for yourself of all the food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them. God revealed his plan to Noah, and he gave Noah about a century or so to complete those plans. God would provide all the means necessary to finish what he wanted to have done. Never before and never since has such a task been assigned to one man. Noah was given the charge to preserve representatives of all creation from God's judgment. Imagine the weight of that on Noah's shoulders. God made a promise. He promised that he would preserve Noah's family and 2 of every kind of animal. In chapter 7, we'll discuss the difference between the clean and the unclean. But the purpose of keeping these animals and 2 of every kind was to preserve the genetic variety of each kind. Now, Noah did not need room for 2 German shepherds, 2 dachshunds, 2 poodles. No. He would have the ancestors from which these animals derive, such as a wolf. His job was to build the vessel. His job was to make preparations for the arrival of the animals. His job was not to hunt those animals down. It was not to capture them, nor was it to bring them to the ark. God caused the animals to come. The animals responded to a supernatural call. What Noah's job was? Build the ark and provide food for all of those animals. What a job that had to have been. God, because it was so large, may have even had some of the animals go into hibernation for a period of that time. So, looking at all of these little details, what can you and I learn from Noah? What can we get from this story? Genesis 6:22 sums it all up, makes it so concise. Thus Noah did, according to all that God commanded him. So he did. Obedience to God's command highlights his faith and his commitments. God asked Noah to build an ark. God had only given him a command without really a lot of explanation or instructions. He asked him to do something that had never been done before, and probably caused Noah to be the laughing stock of the community. But you know what? Noah went ahead and did it anyway. He accepted God's command, and he didn't consider how much energy it was going to take to build this. Remember, he's 500 years old. When God intended to destroy the world with a flood, he didn't ask, let me see, when's it coming? I need to put that on my calendar so I know exactly how long I've got to finish this project. Can you give me a due date for it? Nor did he plan for his future. Let me see, what's going to happen after the ark? You know, he did not consider his fate when the ark was finished. If you destroy the world, if you destroy everything but me and all of us inside the ark, how am I going to make a living? What am I going to do for friends? What? He did not have any answers, but he did it anyway. He simply listened, obeyed, and did it. That's our call today. That's what we can learn from this ancient story. God says something to us. The Bible says something to us. We listen, we obey, and we do it. It's as simple as that.